anything stand firm in the truth, biological truth.
Are you transphobic, Riley?
That is simply not true.
Do you hold anything against transgendered persons?
Absolutely not. I agree Leah Thomas was following the rules set in place by the NCAA, and I have no problem with Leah Thomas. I do believe there's a bit of selfishness and narcissism and entitlement surrounding this person in regards to the utter disregard that Thomas displayed for us in these situations. But I have no animosity towards Thomas. My problem is the NCAA. My problem is the Biden administration pushing a rewrite of Title IX. That is my problem, and that's why I'm here. That's why this issue has become political for me, because I realize that legislation is the way you curb these things. I can't believe it's come to this, but I have no hate in my heart towards anyone, even the protesters who mobbed me. The first thing that I did was prayed for them. I saw the soullessness, the vengeance, the violence in their eyes, and they do it in the name of love and inclusion and acceptance and tolerance and welcoming and embracing diversity, but they did not embrace my diverse thought. That, to me, was what hate looked like, nothing.
Thank you. Ms. Gaines, I'd like to start with you, if I could. And thanks again for sharing your story. I've been touched and saddened to hear of the misogynistic and discriminatory treatment that you received from the NCAA, which I regard as nothing short of shameful. You've handled it with grace and courage, and I appreciate that example that you're setting for so many women and girls across America. Your story reminded me of a letter that I received from a constituent a couple of years ago, a constituent who explained to me her own story with girls and women's athletics. She explained that she would never have been able to go to college, never would have had a chance at a college education, and she'd not done so under an athletic scholarship. And while she was in college, she became the most dominant female track athlete in the state of Utah. And she was a two-time All-American sprinter who held the 100-meter record at BYU for 22 years. She told me that even at the height of her collegiate year, as one of the top female sprinters in the country, she would sometimes go to help her dad, who coached high school track, and she would go to those events with her dad. She said even then, the high school boys could beat her because of biological differences between people who were born male and people who were born female. So what would you say to all the high school female athletes who worry about losing potential college scholarships, to say nothing of the world in which we now face name, image, likeness, endorsements, things like that, all the things that they might forego as a result of having to compete for scholarships, endorsements, and notoriety with people who were born male?
My message would be that it's not transphobic to acknowledge how women deserve respect, how we deserve safety, how we deserve fairness, we deserve keeping our dignity. It's not transphobic to say that. It's not transphobic to say that you can't change your sex. Sex is down to a chromosomal level, and that's not something that can be changed, and that matters in sports. Your biology, sports is the one area where your sexual chromosomes matter. And again, I'll echo Harley's message as well, as you're not alone. The overwhelming majority of people regarding this issue of fairness in women's sports agree that having men in women's sports is wrong and that it's unfair and it's a violation to, again, our privacy and rights to safety as women. So that would be my message: to be bold, be empowered, and before anything stand firm in the truth, biological truth.
Are you transphobic, Riley?
That is simply not true.
Do you hold anything against transgendered persons?
Absolutely not. I agree Leah Thomas was following the rules set in place by the NCAA, and I have no problem with Leah Thomas. I do believe there's a bit of selfishness and narcissism and entitlement surrounding this person in regards to the utter disregard that Thomas displayed for us in these situations. But I have no animosity towards Thomas. My problem is the NCAA. My problem is the Biden administration pushing a rewrite of Title IX. That is my problem, and that's why I'm here. That's why this issue has become political for me, because I realize that legislation is the way you curb these things. I can't believe it's come to this, but I have no hate in my heart towards anyone, even the protesters who mobbed me. The first thing that I did was prayed for them. I saw the soullessness, the vengeance, the violence in their eyes, and they do it in the name of love and inclusion and acceptance and tolerance and welcoming and embracing diversity, but they did not embrace my diverse thought. That, to me, was what hate looked like. Nothing in my heart is hateful.
How about the NCAA? Did the NCAA embrace your diversity? Tell me what attempts that the NCAA made to accommodate you and other female swimmers who felt uncomfortable sharing an open locker room with a biological male.
Nothing. They actually made us feel guilty for feeling as if we were uncomfortable. Time and time again, that's what we saw. There was even a group of girls who undress in the janitor's closet. They changed clothes in the janitor's closet because they felt more comfortable undressing in that environment than they did undressing next to someone with male gaze.
And were they doing that because they were transphobic?
They were doing it because they were violated.
Tell me how they were violated.
I think 2, 3, 4 years ago, if a man claims the identity of simply saying they are a woman, walks into a locker room, a DA would follow this man into a locker room, arrest him, and he's charged with sexual harassment, voyeurism, indecent exposure, and the list goes on. But this was celebrated. This was encouraged. Leah Thomas was then nominated for NCAA Woman of the Year, which is an award that I was also nominated for. But when I saw the full list of nominees and saw that NCAA Woman of the Year was not exclusive to just women, the award was immediately devalued and meaningless to me. That's how they were honoring this, rather than making us feel reassured in our feelings that this was wrong.
When you accommodate men time and time again, refusing to accommodate women, we call that misogyny. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
In a Senate hearing room lined with cameras and quiet calculation, Senator Mike Lee leaned forward, his voice even but edged with purpose. Before him sat Riley Gaines, swimmer, activist, symbol, her words already echoing across the cultural fault lines of a nation divided by definitions of fairness, equality, and identity. The question that hung between them was one that has haunted every debate of the last decade. Are you transphobic? But beneath that question lay something deeper, a nation wrestling not with hate or tolerance, but with truth, power, and who gets to define the boundaries of womanhood. Mike Lee began with sympathy, invoking stories of women who rose through the narrow gates of opportunity, who earned their place in the world one race, one record, one scholarship at a time. He spoke of his constituent, the track star who, at her best, still found herself outpaced by the boys she coached. It was not an insult. It was a statement of biology, he said, a scientific constant turned moral compass. And then he turned to Gaines. What would you say, he asked, to the girls who fear losing their chance, their scholarships, their dreams, because they're forced to compete with those born male? Gaines didn't hesitate. Her answer was poised, deliberate, and heavy with the conviction of someone who had already relived this moment 100 times. It's not transphobic to acknowledge that women deserve respect, safety, fairness, she said. It's not transphobic to say you can't change your sex. Her words landed like stones dropped in still water, measured, resolute, but rippling with consequence. Because in this hearing, language was more than language. It was a weapon. It was a shield. It was the battleground itself. Senator Lee pressed again, his tone soft but surgical. Do you hold anything against transgender persons? Absolutely not, Gaines replied, her voice unwavering. She spoke of prayer, of forgiveness, of protesters who screamed in her face as she prayed for their peace. She said she held no hatred, only frustration. Frustration not at individuals, but at systems, at institutions, at what she called the rewrite of Title IX, a law that once stood as the cornerstone of women's equality. She described locker rooms, janitors' closets turned into sanctuaries for girls who could not find safety in the places meant for them. They weren't being transphobic, she said softly. They were being violated. The room was silent. Every word seemed to tighten the air. In her retelling, the NCAA wasn't a neutral arbiter of fairness. It was an institution that, in her eyes, chose ideology over integrity, one that elevated inclusivity above the boundaries that once defined competition. When you accommodate men time and time again, she said, her voice sharpening, refusing to accommodate women, we call that misogyny. And in that moment, the line between compassion and confrontation blurred. Because this wasn't just about sports. It wasn't just about biology or policy. It was about a country torn between two visions of justice, one rooted in inclusion, the other in distinction. To Gaines, the stakes were simple: women's spaces, women's sports, women's safety. To her critics, her argument was something else, an erasure, a resistance to a broader truth of human diversity. Each side spoke in the language of rights, of fairness, of protection. And yet, they could no longer hear each other. The tragedy of that hearing wasn't the disagreement. It was the silence between the words, the exhaustion of a nation trying to balance empathy with order, compassion with boundaries. Senator Lee nodded, his questions methodical, his tone steady, as if he knew the ground he was treading was electric. In his final words, there was a trace of validation, a recognition that Gaines's pain was real, her argument clear, her story deeply American. The lone athlete standing before power, demanding that the rules not be rewritten in the name of progress. But as the gavel fell, as the cameras dimmed, what lingered wasn't certainty. It was the question itself. Who defines fairness? Because somewhere between biology and belief, between compassion and competition, lies the future of equality. To some, Gaines was a voice of courage, refusing to be silent while institutions blurred the lines she had spent her life training within. To others, she was the embodiment of resistance, a reminder that progress often feels like threat to those who once thought their rights were settled. Yet the deeper story, the one beneath the talking points, is that both sides claim to defend dignity. Both claim to stand for fairness. Both speak the language of justice. And in that contradiction lies the ache of our democracy, a nation where everyone believes they are fighting for the same principle, freedom, yet cannot agree on what that freedom means. When Riley Gaines says, "It's not hate to tell the truth," she is calling back to an older idea of America, one where truth was fixed, unyielding, a compass that pointed only one way. But the world she now inhabits is shifting. The compass spins. The truth itself is contested. And that is the story of our time, not just a Senate hearing, not just a debate about sports, but a moral crossroads for a divided republic. As the hearing closes, the lights fade across faces still set in conviction. Some see bravery, others see blindness. But all see the cost of a nation at war with its own reflection. And in that reflection, there are no easy villains, only people trying to protect what they believe is sacred. The future of Title IX, of fairness, of identity itself, will not be decided in one hearing or one headline. It will be decided by how we listen, by whether we can separate hate from fear, disagreement from dehumanization. Because if democracy means anything, it must mean this, that even in our fiercest debates, humanity cannot be collateral. Music swells, slow, reflective piano under the voice. This has been Liberal Freedom, a space for truth, courage, and the stories that shape who we are. If you believe in honest dialogue, in empathy without surrender, in freedom without fear, subscribe, share, and stand with us. Together, we will keep asking the questions that power wants to silence. Together, we'll keep fighting for a democracy that listens, even when it disagrees. Because truth deserves a voice, and freedom, real freedom, demands understanding. This is Liberal Freedom.